So, dear brothers and sisters in Islam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Inshallah, what we feel we're doing in a parenting course like this is real effort for Imam Mahdi. If we were able to produce those soldiers to serve the Imam, then we've really done something excellent for the job. So we're hoping that inshallah Allah accepts our effort in that regard. Also, alhamdulillah, today is Mother's Day. So it's not that we are copying the West, but it's rather that any chance that we have, because the station in Islam for motherhood is so important, then any chance we have to celebrate and to appreciate our sisters, and that's tawfiq from Allah. So alhamdulillah, happy Mother's Day to all of our mothers. Now, the one thing that I would add is that there are levels when it comes to motherhood. There are ranks when it comes to motherhood. And so hopefully brothers and sisters are all looking for those higher ranks and those higher levels. Once we are told that Nabi Sulaiman was listening and overheard a conversation of two sparrows, two little birds. And the birds were talking about conception and having a baby, and Nabi Sulaiman is overhearing them. So he was surprised at the motivation of the two sparrows. When the sparrows were talking to one another, they were saying why they want to have a child. This brings us into what we're trying to do today. And they said that maybe Allah will grant us a child who remembers Allah. The sparrow said, maybe Allah will grant us a child who remembers Allah. When Nabi Sulaiman heard the sparrows and that kind of motivation, he said, هذه النية, that niyyah, خير من mamlakati, that this niyyah is better than my kingdom. Okay, that's with two birds. Now you and I, we are the best of Allah's creation. And if we are able to have the right motivation when it comes to raising children, then what reward does that have with Allah? The reward of presenting soldiers, elite soldiers of the Imam. I want to mention a hadith that hopefully it serves for us, for all of us as a reminder, right? Because hopefully when it comes to those levels, we want to have the shock troops for the Mahdi, the elite soldiers for the Mahdi, which means we have to dig a little deeper. The hadith is this: Man qaddama awladan. So whoever can present children, awladan, yahtasibuhum indallah. This parent on Yawm al-Qiyamah says that I'm expecting reward for the tarbiyah that I did. I did tarbiyah the right way. If someone is expecting reward from Allah, whoever can present children, but I'm expecting reward from Allah because I did it the right way, then the hadith says, حَجَبُوهُ مِنَ النَّارِ بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ. Those very same children who were raised the right way will serve as a barrier between their parents and the fire with the permission of Allah. Why? Brothers and sisters, true Islamic tarbiyah is different than doing outward techniques that you and I, we're here to learn some techniques and then we're going to fix those children. True Islamic tarbiyah, when you do it the right way, it's an inner change. We're changing. We're saying we're going to put Allah first when it comes to raising my children. I may have to get out of my comfort zone, but the child needs something. I want to be a soldier of the Imam. I want to serve the soldier of the Imam. I will change myself and my habits in order for my child to turn out the right way. I shared a story with brothers and sisters before, at least some of you. One of my favorite stories when it comes to tarbiyah. A friend of mine had been blessed with a little boy. He and his family had been blessed with a little boy. And they went over to one of our urafa. So my friend, he went to his spiritual teacher. And he said that to the sheikh, he told him, he said, I would like to raise my child in a way, he said, I will make my child, in Farsi they said, Adam, like my child will become a real human being, a soldier of the Imam. Inshallah, I'm going to raise my child the right way. And he said his teacher had a real belly laugh when he said that. When he said that I'm going to make my son become Adam, the teacher laughed. After the teacher finished laughing, The teachers said, the child is here to make you adab. If we're going to do this the right way, if we're going to raise the soldiers of the Mahdi, that means we're going to be changing ourselves. We're here to change ourselves, to figure everything out, right? Because if you remember from the first time we've had these discussions, our children, based on a hadith of the Ahlul Bayt, were born perfect. They were muwahideen. They were born on the fitrah. They are an amana. Our children are an amana. If I'm going to raise my children the right way, in such a way that I'm expecting reward from Allah, that means I will do right by the amana. I'll change myself to do right by the amana. So we're a test for our children. Our children are a test for us. We're also a test for one another. So now, brothers and sisters, we're going to just so alhamdulillah, we have some new faces here, but you're on a train that's moving 100 miles an hour. So inshallah, we'll all catch up to where we are. And then, of course, questions, if there are some, then I'm available afterwards. What we're talking about, brothers and sisters, is raising children for the first 7 years. When it came to raising children for the first 7 years, if we as parents are able to ensure our children feel truly loved, intense love, not that we feel, everybody feels intense love for their children. If our children feel intense love, a lot of the work that we are trying to do has already been done. The Prophet says, Al-hubbu asasi. Love is the foundation of my way. A big part of how we show love to children for the first 7 years was freedom. We also realized, based on our previous discussions, a lot of parents aren't willing to do it right. Freedom, giving freedom in the right way, the way that Islam says from the beginning, is a challenge. And many parents will not bend when it comes to that challenge of granting freedom the way that Allah said. We already covered the reasons why that was the case. Now, brothers and sisters, I'm going to just kind of quickly bring us to where we were. Because if you remember, last time we left off on our case studies. We didn't get a chance to go over our case studies. But before we go over case studies, very quickly, I just want to kind of bring us up to speed. But first, salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So, brothers and sisters, if you remember, what happens was when we were doing Tarbiyah, we said that Tarbiyah even starts with the house that we choose to live in. The house that we buy a house based on Tarbiyah. As a soldier of Imam Mahdi, someone who's trying to raise the soldiers of Imam Mahdi, a soldier of Imam Mahdi is not selfishly thinking, my house, how beautiful it is, how wonderful it is. Rather, this is a place where I'm going to raise those spiritual warriors for the Mahdi. That meant even when it came to selecting the house, so we talked about the idea of if it was a choice, we could rent a house or buy a house. One house was, for instance, more spacious, but another house was more beautiful. Then because of Tarbiyah, we would buy the house that was more spacious, so the child has more room to run in, for instance. We also talked about the idea that, let's say we're purchasing things for the house. We have fine china, for instance, or I would like to have these things. Another time, if I have certain glasses or cups or rugs, it means I have to do less shouting at my child. Those silver bullets we're saving for later. So my child, if I have a very expensive rug and they're playing in the first several years and they ruin my rug, then that might mean I use some of my silver bullets and I'm shouting at the child, for instance. But if I buy a rug that's inexpensive, then I'm saying that the child comes first, Tarbiyah comes first, and I will adjust. Okay, so we talked about that. The other thing that we talked about was the idea of trying to compensate for the natural limitations that are there in our house. So our children need to run around, they need to be outside. Our houses, no matter how big they are, their children need more room to run. So we compensate for that by taking our children outside and making up for that. And then we also talked about the idea of creating open space or maximizing the space that we have in our house. So instead of our house being cluttered with things, we would go over and make sure that our houses are perhaps more simpler. I don't have expensive, let's say a vase or something that's again going to stop me and then I'm shouting at the child. I don't want to do that. So The other thing that we talked about that we're going to be using nowadays is the idea of when my child is being free, there were two things that I was supposed to do. One of them is active participation in the games that my children play. So my children are younger. These are the 2 to 3 year olds. Myself, as a parent, I am choosing to play the game with them. So I'm actively participating. Number two, as a playmate, as a fellow playmate with the child, as opposed to as a parent, I can suggest things. So let's say we were playing and it was water play that we're going to talk a little bit about more later, water play. It was a rug. And I know that if they, for instance, would do water play in the kitchen, it would be safer, better, little less. As a playmate, I'm suggesting, right? I'm a parent, get up and get out. There's another time, let's go over here. As a playmate, I'm suggesting, and we are going outside to do that. So our discussion last time where we left off was this. What can we do to help set our children free? There are certain steps that we could do to make sure that our children experience the first 7 years of freedom. There's a few simple steps that we could do, and if we did them, our children would experience this. So we were talking about those steps, and we talked about the idea of water play and the torba. If we have time, we're going to cover several areas, ways where we could be flexible and allow our children to play, to engage in playing and experience freedom. After that, once we cover that, then we're going to start talking about two things if we can, and that is, let's say our child does something which is ugly and inappropriate. How do we correct that behavior? And also, how do we correct dangerous behavior in such a way that it doesn't conflict with the freedom and that emotional bond that we're building with the child. Remember, we're going to need that emotional bond for later. I can use it up now by correcting, by fixing. But then when I need it later, when the child is 14, 15, 16, 17, I won't be able to lean on it because I burned up my chances by screaming and shouting when the child was young. Okay. So I think we covered the idea of water play, at least to a certain extent. We talked about the idea of this being a natural desire for the child. Children need this. This helps them get out energy. We as parents will figure out how to make that a possibility. So whether that meant putting down a plastic rug, let's say in the kitchen if we're worried about water getting everywhere, right? A bigger rug. Or having towels, that'll be something else that we do. Playing outside, these are all things that we could do so that our children can have that experience. Now we're going to go through some of our case studies. Okay, so our first case study, unfortunately, is a bad mom. Okay, it's Mother's Day, but it's okay. It's always the mom. Oh, okay. I won't say Sadaqallahu al-Aliyyul Azim. All right. What happens is, this is a little girl. This little girl's name is Zahra. We've changed the names, inshallah, so there's not reflecting any real personalities. Okay. This little girl doesn't like to bathe. She doesn't enjoy baths. She's 3 years old, and now her mother, they're having guests over tonight. And it's been 2 days. It's always a fight. It's 2 or 3 days since she's had a proper bath, but it's summertime. She's running and playing. She's a little musty. The mom is not going to have this little girl come over, and the guests, if they take one whiff of this little girl, then she'll be the talk of the town. So now she's waiting, right? The sister in this story, her name is Asma. So Asma is now waiting for her daughter. So she says, Zahra, and Zahra comes over, yes, mommy, to see what's going to happen. Without saying anything, she grabs Zahra's hands and she starts marching her towards the bathroom. Zahra realizes it's bath time. So now Zahra is pulling back and the mom is pulling. Mom is firmly insisting. So she drags her down the hallway. She gets in there and she physically puts her into, and again, the mom's still not talking. She puts her in the bathtub. The little girl is already screaming. The mom turns on the water. Zahra is now screaming, the water is too cold. The water is cold. And the mom's like, stop being a diva. And she adjusts tries to adjust the water for her child. And she gets out, I don't know if you guys know what a loofah is. This is a bad mom. This big, like, kind of sponge thing. And she gets it. It's kind of like, and she starts washing the little girl. The girl's fighting back. She's washing. Soap's getting in the girl's eyes. It burns. Turning on the water. The water is hot. The water is cold, right? The little girl is screaming and fighting. By the time she's in, because the mom is getting it done. grimly getting it done. And the little girl comes out of the bath. And now when she comes out of the bath, she doesn't like baths. She doesn't like bathing. She hasn't had a good experience. Okay? We're going to contrast that with the good mom. The good mom is raising a little boy named Ahmad, and she wants Ahmad to love baths. So, what this lady, will call her Fatima. What Fatima does is when it's bath time, she has already gone in. First of all, their bathroom is always smelling wonderful. For her son, bath time means playtime. The mother comes in, she's already adjusted the water so it's warm, it's nice, it's comfortable, and she has his favorite toys. He already has them in the bathtub, the favorite toys of the little boy. So the little boy comes in, she says, calls Ahmad, Ahmad, yes, mama. And he goes over, it's bath time. So his mom is now, she's sitting alongside him and he's just sitting down there. And first he's just playing with the water, right? The mom goes, she adds a few dippers, different colors. So then now he gets those and he's a little kid. She's helping him to wash himself. She has the right soaps. She's doing everything. So it's a wonderful experience. She's singing to him, talking to him. She puts her feet inside the water. The whole experience of taking a bath was wonderful. You're such a brave boy. Very good, right? Then after that, after she has taken everything, then now Ahmad loves baths, right? So that meant that the person who is thinking about it the right way, it's going to take longer. They're very kind, and there's a lot of water play involved. So now, what we're going to do for the water play is a couple of things. One, we'll think about the time that because we know it's a natural thing. Children should be allowed to do that. What we want to do is make sure that if it's cold outside and we're going to allow water play, that our children are going in water play, we'll probably stop for a couple hours ahead, because some parents are worried about their kids getting sick. We stop 1 or 2 hours ahead, there's no worry about the parents getting sick. If it's summertime, then we'll get one of those plastic tubs, get the kids outside so they're playing and they get it out of their system. If there's the winter, obviously, will be inside. So those will be some things that we keep in mind when it comes to that water play. Another area where we can set children free is when it comes to playing in the closets and cabinets. Now, some parents don't like to have their children playing in closets or cabinets because they're afraid of a couple of things. One is that sometimes if the child is allowed to go into a cabinet or a closet, so I'm talking about even in the parents' room that they're going in there, either they might go and they might get something that's dangerous. They don't want that to happen. Or maybe I have medical records, I have birth certificates, I have jewelry, something. If my child who's very small is going in there, they'll maybe mess with some of these things. So a couple of things we want to do for these small children. We don't want to, and this is something we're doing with the whole experience, we don't want to just have the throw out the baby with the bathwater approach. I just lock all of the doors and we don't worry about it, and that's not an issue for us. Rather, what we want to do is some cabinets or closets should be such that that small child has a chance to go in them and explore. We as parents have already taken those documents that are more sensitive or jewelry or these things, those things that a child shouldn't have access to are already above their reach. They're not able to get it. Maybe we have a filing cabinet that we've already locked. One thing we won't do is this. Some parents will lock that cabinet in front of the child, right? So you don't go here, Bismillah, go, right? That's not a child who's experiencing a lot of freedom. If you do it when the child's not there, and I just come in and some of the doors are locked, those are just some of the doors. There are other doors that were open and I was able to go. But if I'm locking then that's not that feeling of that maximum freedom that we're trying to get the children to do. Next one, drawing on the walls. So some little kids, inshallah, I don't know how many of us here have little kids who enjoy drawing on the walls. But for some people, again, that's a red line. If my child wants to draw and mark on the walls, and maybe sometimes somebody's even renting, right? So I'm renting and then my walls are getting messed up and stuff like that. So again, when it comes to children and art and drawing, for many children, when they draw, they're having a special experience. I don't know how many, have any of you seen your children or observed Just observed your children when they're drawing something on their own. Anybody? Has anybody paid attention to the expression on the child's face when they're drawing? What did you notice when your child, I'm talking about a very small child, when they first start drawing? He's telling a story while he's doing it, okay. Anybody else notice anything else about their children when they're drawing? Go ahead.
Very immersed in what they're doing.
Very immersed. So the first part was they're telling a story, right? For some children, it's the first time they're making their mark on the world, right? So it's a big thing for a child. They're going over and they're drawing. What happens is, for some of us, the children will end up perhaps drawing on the wall. So what do we do about that? And so perhaps with those same two principles of active participation and then being a playmate, if our child wanted to draw, we could also be in there, have those big papers, and we're there with them and they're drawing, for instance, in those areas. Another thing would be those easels and those other boards and stuff like that, where again, the child is able to make sure they do that. One thing to keep in mind, if it is the case that we are perhaps renting, and when we are renting, our child does, for instance, they mark on the wall. So I'm renting somebody else's property, and I'm going to have to pay a price because now, to pay a price means I have to pay money to go over and repaint the walls and these kind of things. One point to kind of keep in mind is this. How valuable is it to us, or how important is it to us that our child doesn't suffer psychological bruising? So there's one person, when I see that this child is messing up on the wall, I go over and I start screaming and shouting at the child. How damaging is that? How scarring is that to be shouted at by your parents? And which one's more valuable? If I have to pay some money to repaint the walls, to make things right, it's definitely worth it to pay that price and make sure the tarbiyah is done right, as opposed to coming down like a ton of bricks, and then the child, they remember that I was drawing and I was having my masterpiece. And if you remember this, we learned this before. When somebody is really enjoying themselves, if a child is immersed, and then I come down like a ton of bricks, the feeling for the child is much worse, right? The idea that I was happy, I was enjoying myself, I was really into this, and I wasn't doing anything wrong. And then now, the person coming down like a ton of bricks on me. So that's another one that we want to keep in mind. Another thing that we had talked about was playing with food. Now, we already talked about why it's not israf for children to play with their food, right? And if we allow this to happen, then eating food becomes a pleasant experience for the children. Those children who are allowed to play with their food and take their time, it's a pleasant experience for them. They'll like eating and they'll enjoy it. There are some parents, though, who feel that it's kind of unclean or uncouth, that a child is kind of very messy and sticky and stuff like that. So a couple of things to think about with that. Hopefully we aren't those parents who are, so some of us maybe, and it might not be for many homes, for some people, they can even, or they actually do, as parents, they sit on the floor. They have a bigger mat, so their child can actually get up and be free, be playing with the food, and the parents they're just living simpler, right, in that way. Another way, of course, is the child seating and stuff like that. But one thing we want to kind of keep in mind, there are some people who, because they're so sensitive to a child being clean, they'll constantly clean the child. And cleaning a child it's not a fun experience if I'm being constantly wiped. So no, the children are going to be messy. That's completely fine. The other one is the idea of allowing for extra time when it comes to a child eating. So I know, one, a child won't necessarily get hungry when I'm hungry. That's a given. Number two, if a parent is allowing their child to eat and to play, it'll take longer. So I have to plan that in, that it's going to take longer for my child to get through their food, but they're loving eating, having this good experience, and that's something that we're okay with. And the other one, of course, is playing while they're eating, which again we encourage. We're letting them eat with their hands. They're eating and they're playing. Now, another area of, again, us learning to set our children free is when it comes to children and books and making sure that our children are readers. Maybe some of you have seen the recommendations of the leader when he talks about how important books are and that we should do something so that our children are readers. Unfortunately, sometimes even if somebody has a degree, and I read books to get my degree, but being a natural reader, reading for leisure, is not something that I'm doing. Whereas we want to actually create a situation where our children are big readers. The leader says there is nothing that replaces books, and we want to encourage this. So, one of the areas of us setting children free is them being able to play with books. So remember that pleasant association that a child has with a book, this is a first step to the child being a reader. It's not just sitting them down in front of a book. Rather, they're able to play with books. The danger with that, when we're talking about these small children, is that small children tend to like to rip books, right? They're going over and they're ripping these books that we have. So we, of course, we're going to be planning for that. How can we make it so the children are able to have this experience and to rip the books without us kind of flipping out on them? So number one would be we purposefully arrange our books in our house. We might have certain books that we don't want the child to play with. Those books will be up higher, but we will go to library sales and other places and have books at their level that they can play with because we want them to have the experience. Picture books, books that they like. And we're just, right now, we're creating a reader, somebody who later, when they're 50, they're a reader. But right now, it's just that I like books, I could play with books, and I am ripping them. So we're not stopping them from doing that. Ideally, and many of us probably have this, a shelf which is specific for the children. So it's a beautiful shelf, and the child's books are over there. Not stopping them from ripping the books. They're getting that energy out. Now, there is one concern, and that's going to lead us to our case study. The concern is this: if my child has gotten used to playing with books and ripping books, being free, and this was one of the areas that I was allowing that to happen, then won't my child also have a tendency to play when it comes to religious books? Perhaps the Quran, perhaps Mafati. The same child was going over and ripping these different books. Now they have that kind of thing, so then they'll come and they want to do this with some of our religious books. When it comes to religious books, brothers and sisters, then there's a couple of points for us to keep in mind. One is that there is a big difference between religious books and regular books. And we're going to make sure that our children get that. But we're going to make sure, and we're going to teach how, or show how children, inshallah, can learn that certain books are sacred texts. How do we do that so that they still have that overall experience? Number one is that most of our training when it comes to the sacred text will be through observation. So our children are going to be watching how we interact with Quran, with these books of dua, and what we'll learn is that we're supposed to be doing these things in front of our children. Religion isn't something that we hide from our children. This is now a quote from the leader. So he's taught us this. He says that you should be reciting Quran in front of your children. Father, mother, they have a certain time during the day, they're reading Quran, and their children are watching. This is on purpose. We're reciting Quran in front of your children. Make dua with your children present. That's also another thing that he's talking about. More than that, talk to Allah right in front of your children. So your children are seeing that Allah is a very alive, right? He says that, so make dua. Practically teach your children to make dua and talk to God through your actions and practice. Of course, you never lie to them. You don't engage in backbiting with them. You don't belittle anyone in front of them. And also he says to make sure that your children, again through observation, they see that you're unattached to the dunya. That your child can see through your interactions with you that things aren't as important as people. That's just from the child watching the interaction with the parent. Now, a couple of things. One is that sacred books should be kept separate from our regular books. We have the Quran, for instance, we'll have a special place in our house for the Quran. For instance, it'll be on a mantle. It'll be somewhere where the child can see it, right? But it's a special place where it's different from the other ones. They said we should allow interaction with the Quran under our supervision. So we as parents, we're letting our child, and they're flipping through the Quran, for instance, but here now, we as parents, so they see that how we interact with it, but we also allow with supervision. If we do see that our child has grabbed a copy of the Quran without looking, and they do something that's disrespectful to it, then again, because these are small children, we're not going to create a bad association between that child and the Quran by overreacting and coming down like a ton of bricks, right? We'll try to exchange the Quran with the child, make sure they don't get the Quran from something else. If the Quran, for instance, the child wouldn't give us through it gently, then yes, we would first firmly and then finally be serious and take the Quran from the child. So now we'll do a case study with a little kid, and see, this kid now is like say 10 to 12 years old, and we're watching how this kid learned that the Quran was special. So the kid is saying that from the time I was young, he's now 10, 12, but he's talking about his experience, how he grew up in the Quran in his house. This kid, his name is Mahmoud. So Mahmoud says, from the time I was young, I always remember that my father, his face would be kind of wet when he went towards the Quran. I learned later it was because he had made wudu when he went to touch the Quran. I noticed how he took the Quran down, that he would always, for instance, take it with both hands. For instance, he would kiss the Quran. I've seen him with other books, but I see his interaction with the Quran is a little different. I remember my mother would sometimes be reciting Quran. My mother is reciting Quran. And I would see, as I was sitting down with my father, because we could hear her reciting from the other room, I remember seeing that little smile that would come on my father's face whenever my mother recited the Quran. I remember one time when my mother, she stumbled and the Quran fell. And I remember her picking it up, kissing it, and saying words in Arabic. Later on, I learned that was istighfar, just from that interaction with the Quran. She used to let me hold the Quran with her, and I would kind of flip through it because I was a little kid in the beginning. And I would notice my mother would carefully, those areas pages that I had bent, she would be carefully folding them back the right way. She would kiss the Quran and she would make me also kiss the Quran. One time, when my mother wasn't looking, I grabbed the copy of the Quran and I'm running and it fell. When it fell, my mother heard the noise from the other room. She came into the room and she saw that I was there with the Quran. So my mother came over to me, again, not screaming or anything like that. She asked me for the Quran gently. I gave her the Quran. She then took the Quran. She started talking to God, apologizing. She kissed the Quran, doing istighfar. Then after that, she let me sit down with her, and I went over and I went through some copies of the Quran with her. So now this little kid who's grown up in this way, always seeing this from the age of 3, this person, the way that they view the Quran is very different because of the interaction that they were seeing, right? So that's another one that we're going to kind of keep in mind. The next one is, how do we handle or how do we let children be free at gatherings? Right? When we are invited to somebody's house, then how about our children experiencing freedom over there? So, brothers and sisters, when it comes to us visiting one another, right? We don't do it as, I don't assume that we do it as much as sometimes you would see overseas, that it was very much, it was like neighbors were very friendly with one another. I remember going as a houses student to Iran, and growing up here, I didn't necessarily know who my neighbors were. I wasn't from Dearborn or anything, non-Muslims. So I remember we went to Iran, and I didn't know who my neighbor was. We wanted to have a majlis in my house, so we had a sayyid, a scholar. He just came over. He was like, "Oh, I'll go over and I'll get some chairs and some sugar from the neighbors." I was just like, I don't know who these people are. He just went over to them, got chairs and these kind of things. We just never had that kind of interaction with the neighbors. So I'm not saying it's as much as over there, but we do want to encourage the idea of visiting one another, seeing one another, hanging out with one another. This is hadith now. The hadith is from Imam Kadhim. He says, لَيْسَ شَيْءٌ أَنْكَى لِإِبْلِيسِ وَجُنُودِهِ. There is nothing which is more hated by Iblis and his hosts than min ziyarat al-ikhwan fillah, ba'dihim li ba'd. When people who are brothers for the sake of Allah, when they visit one another, there's nothing more hated by Iblis than this. This breaks Iblis's back. Having said that, so we want to encourage visiting one another and stuff like that. Sometimes what happens is a person who is used to having children be free, the reason they won't let this go is they say, well, look, one, my child will go over and then in front of other people, they're going to go crazy. I won't be able to take them anywhere. That's why I'm coming down on the thing. I don't want a Tasmanian devil. So a couple of areas for us to review. One of them is, how often do we visit one another? If I was visiting so much that it means that I'm having those negative interactions with my child, then maybe I have to cut back on the amount of times I visit. Number two would be, how long do I stay? Right? There's no rule that we as parents, we have to stay as long as we need to feel that we've socialized. If somebody is thinking in ways of tarbiyah, they might say, my children, if they stay for a very long time, then it'll be more likely they get tired and we get tired. If they're tired and we're tired, then we're less likely to be on our A game. The child also, if they stayed a long time, then they're being annoying. So then we'll start to come down on the... So the hadith of the Ahlul Bayt talk about the idea of having that it's beneficial for us to visit, even if they are short visits. So the Imam Jawad says this: meeting brothers puts one in good spirits and increases one's intellect, even if it's a brief visit. The other one is, who are we visiting? Some of our hosts are very sensitive to children and children making noise and children being out of control. Some guests understand the idea that children need to be free. We might have to visit a little less to those who are very sensitive, right? And spend more time with those who are okay with it. So we're in gatherings, and one of the problems is that sometimes the people who are hosting us, they don't know the dangers of being a controlling parent. Everybody wants to do right by their kids, but nobody knows, not nobody, many times parents are unaware of what will happen and how this will come back to bite me if I'm not observing this right of the child for freedom. Now, the broader principle, brothers and sisters, that we're going to remember always is this: those people who don't have the motivation to raise their children the right way and to spend that time with them as they should, because it is harder. It's easier to be stern and come down like a ton of bricks and be old school. It's more difficult to raise a soldier of Imam Mahdi. But what happens if we don't? This is hadith now. Man mana'a haqqan lillah. Whoever stops a right that Allah has bestowed. And no, I'm going to do it different. I'm smarter than Rasulullah. I'm going to do it my way. Man mana'a haqqan lillah azza wa jal. Anfaqa fi batilin mithlay. This person will pay the price, but now they'll pay it 2 times over. It's a lot easier to raise the child the right way and do it the way Allah and His Messenger have said than it is to be trying to undo the mistakes that we made. So, why was I mentioning these things? Because one of the things is, even if I am struggling with my children being free when they go to gatherings, part of our job was having conversations and spreading awareness and talking to other parents, not in a top-heavy fashion that I'm a know-it-all, but raising questions. Why is it that we should have our children be free, as opposed to I'm just controlling my kids or fixing my kids? Let's have some conversations and get some of the barakat of sharing some of these ahadith of the Ahlul Bayt. So when it comes to our children playing, then another one that we can make up for with freedom, we're out now, we're guests in somebody's house. The wise parent will perhaps bring toys. I brought some toys that we don't play with normally, so now my children are over there in the gathering and they're enjoying themselves by playing with the toys. Or, and this is something that, inshallah, there's not one parent that this always happens to. If there is a children, they're playing, and I don't want to see my children going over and doing the wrong things, one parent may have to sacrifice and become a playmate with those children during the gathering. So again, if this can be a shared responsibility, it's not that always one parent has to sit down with the child and play with them. It's perhaps the parents who are there, because everybody's thinking about raising the children and how to raise it properly. As parents, one of us will go over and they're engaging the children in conversation, they're talking, this, that, and the other, so that it's a fun experience for everybody. Now, brothers and sisters, another area is freedom when it comes to food. Freedom when it comes to food. Now, most of the times, our children aren't aware of the dangers or harms that are in certain foods. How would children know, right? For children, they're just aware, how does it taste? Does it taste good? If it tastes good, I like that kind of food. One of our jobs as parents is to manage our children's taste when it comes to food. So for instance, let's say I get my kids used to a lot of sugar, right? If you give a whole bunch of sugar, then the child won't think it's sweet if I don't get as much sugar, for instance, because I gave them those different kinds of sugar. That's one thing, right? Or salt, or these kind of things. But it's our job to kind of manage the child's taste as opposed to letting them get addicted to food that's harmful for them, and then we're trying to fix that, right? Because there are certain foods, for instance, let's say soda. If I introduce that to my child, not only are there physical effects for the child for certain foods, but even when it comes to behavior, sometimes when a child is misbehaving, it's because of the food that I've consumed, right? But that goes back to parenting. So we as parents were obviously aware of some of the dangers of the different food, but I wanna give you kind of a case study. So we're gonna try and make sure our children are eating healthy foods, ideally, natural foods, ideally, right? But a case study. In our first case study, there is Nadia and Feiruz. Nadia and Feiruz. So Nadia has a little boy named Qasim. Qasim is about 1 to 2 years old, and Nadia's had a tough day today. Last night, she and Feiruz, they had guests until almost midnight. It was so late that her husband told her, he's like, look, let's not worry about the dishes tonight. We'll fix it. We'll worry about the dishes tomorrow. So the next day, she's working to kind of clean that up. In addition, Qasim had a rough night, right? Qasim was throwing up, right? So she didn't sleep well either. So it was a rough day dealing with him. He had a couple of accidents during the day. So then now her husband, Feiruz, comes home at the end of the day, and he's bringing home a watermelon and a cantaloupe, right? With a Kroger bag, watermelon and cantaloupe, natural foods. So when she sees the natural fruits, then she gives a small plastic smile, right? But she knows this means more work. He comes in, he puts the fruits on. He's good at picking out fruits. He puts them on the table. He thinks he's done a great job. She goes over, she puts them inside the fridge, and 2 hours later, the family is quietly eating the cantaloupe or watermelon, right? Okay. Next day, Qasim still isn't over his sickness, right? Again, it's a rough night. It's been long. They're potty training him as well. So now he's had some accidents. And her husband comes home, and in her husband's bags, he has some Cheetos and some her favorite soda, some Fago. Now we're not going to promote the other ones, right? So that and some bite-sized candy bars. And so the wife, who was so tired before, when she saw the fruits and stuff like that, she even looked more tired and harassed. Now her face lights up. That infectious smile is on her face. And Qasim, who's been waiting to see his mommy smile all day, he sees how happy mommy is when he brings in it. She gives her husband a big hug. Thank you. You know how my handsome hero. Okay. Then they go on the porch and they're now eating the Cheetos and drinking, right? And Qasim's looking and Then they wonder 2 years later why Qasim's addicted to the Cheetos and these things, right? But he was observing and watching how the reaction was when it came to the natural foods versus that. So because of that, then we want to make sure that our food, we're packaging it nicely, right? With the natural foods that we have, right? Not just screaming, eat it, give them something. No. We're letting them play with the food. Sometimes natural foods can be some nuts or whatever. If the kids aren't allergic, they can break them. It's fun to be able to play with the natural foods. We can talk to them about the benefits of the different foods. Remember, one of our most important ways of doing tarbiyah is songs, poetry, stories. So we can be over there, we're teaching the child why it's important to have those different natural foods. And then we're also spreading awareness. We're also spreading awareness with other parents who perhaps don't know why we're not letting our children have some of the soda or whatever it is that we're not letting them. So the conversations. With that, I would just say just take it from me, okay? Let's not be paranoid either. Sometimes we have like a tinfoil hat and everything's dangerous, right? And it just becomes too much information and the people don't want to, they won't even hear us, right? But there's other times when you and I know certain foods are not a good idea, right? This is dangerous for a child. And you can have a conversation and convince, and not only are your own children not suffering, somebody else will rethink the food that they give to their child. But if we go the other way of everything's dangerous, then it just becomes an overload and people don't even take us too seriously. That's one. The other one is this. Sometimes you and I, we're giving our children natural food, and then we show up at a party or gathering or whatever, and then our child starts to act out when they see the other foods, right? We're always giving them, dried nuts or whatever like that. And then they see the other food, and now our kid starts to cry and act out. Instead of us being able to give advice to the other parents, now the other parents are looking at us. Oh, you guys see, this is what your tarbiyah does. You deny them, then your kids breathe. Over there, stopping everything, right? So now again, for us, you and I, we're not going to pay any attention to those wrong advice that people will give us. Sometimes what happens is the food's dangerous. The food's not good. Nobody should be drinking or eating these kinds of things. For us, pushing back means having those conversations. Explain to them, let's say there was something dangerous that your child wanted to do. And then now, in front of others, they start acting out. It's natural for a child when they see different kinds of food, even if they're not being stifled at home, when they see different kinds of food, they want to eat. They're hungry. That's natural, and there's nothing wrong with that. But should I do something that's dangerous for my child, not good for their psyche, not good for their physical body, in order that they don't act out? And a wise parent would do that. Okay, now, brothers and sisters, we're going to come to dealing with the red line. So up until now, hopefully what we've covered is this: ways that you and I can set our children free. We don't actually have to say no. We don't have to stop them. Because with those simple steps, we found ways where our children could be running around in the house and we've saved our silver bullets. But we mentioned that there are two red lines when it comes to the freedom of children. And our children have been hardwired to accept these two boundaries. One of them are things that are dangerous for children, and the second one were things that are inappropriate for children. So inshallah, what we're going to try and do is to handle both of those things. We'll start off with the things that are dangerous for children. Now, most of the time when we're talking about a child engaging in dangerous behavior, many times we're talking about children that are very young. They're very young. The reason we're talking about young children doing dangerous things is because young children don't have experience. They don't know, for instance, they're too small for us to have a conversation with them. So boiling water or the sharp knife or whatever it is, they just don't have experience. So now the child is engaging in dangerous behavior. That's different than the inappropriate behavior. So we want to do a couple of things. One of them is making sure that our houses are child friendly, as in we don't leave things around for children to get into that were dangerous for them to do, and then we have to come around and we have to correct. Right? Imam Ali has a very beautiful hadith. He says, min al-isma. So one part of isma, ta'adhurul ma'asi. It's just when you don't have access to certain sins, you just end up not doing them, right? So us doing our homework and making sure that our homes are child friendly, which would just mean that we don't have those dangerous things for our children. I want to give you another case study. This story is about a little kid named Ibrahim. Ibrahim is 4 years old. Ibrahim is watching television with his family, and they're watching one of those exciting action movies. And in this action movie, the criminal in the movie comes in with a ski mask to a 7-Eleven, and he has a knife out, and there's a mother and a daughter over there, a little girl, and then he grabs the little girl, right? And he's threatening her. The mom puts the purse on the floor, kicking him across. Now, little Ibrahim, since he's only 4 years old, he's completely absorbed in this, and he's watching it. He's actually scared. Ibrahim's heart is beating very fast, but Ibrahim's not crying. When he's enjoying the movie, the other one he's not crying because last time when he did cry, then he wasn't allowed to watch the movie, right? So he watches, and then after that, then the thief gets the thing, and then just as he's about to leave the 7-Eleven, the cashier tries to ring the bell. The guy comes back in the mask, and he backhands the clerk, right? Okay. So now the movie's over. Alhamdulillah, movie's over. Everybody's putting away their things. They're putting away the food. Alhamdulillah. And now the parents have put everything away. Ibrahim comes back into the kitchen, 4 years old. This time, Ibrahim has his mom's stocking and it's wrapped around his face. And Ibrahim goes right over to where the knives are in the kitchen, right? And then after that, he starts walking to his little sister's room. Right? But that was the parents giving the child access to something by watching that show. Little kids shouldn't be seeing those things. For them, it was very real. So we want to avoid, step number one, is avoid indirectly teaching dangerous behavior. Indirectly, I'm teaching that dangerous behavior is okay. So for instance, I'm going to give a mom example and a dad example. Let's say there's a mom who she has, I don't know if you call them mom hands, my mother used to say, but I can actually take a pot that's kind of hot and I can get it off the thing because I've been doing it a while, so I can handle it, right? Even then, because my children are watching, I'll use the safety first rules because my kids are looking at me. So I'll make sure I use mitts, even though I could just grab the pot out. But now I'm just going over and using those mitts so that the kids, when they repeat my actions and do what I do, they do it the safe way. Another way of making sure we're not teaching the children dangerous behavior indirectly is using a hookah pipe, right? If children are seeing daddy and he uses a hookah pipe, right? Our children are going to love their fathers. And because they've seen their fathers do something, the idea that these children develop the same habit is very high. Okay? So we don't want to indirectly a behavior that we don't want our kids to see. We want to make sure we're not teaching them that. Number two would be ensuring that our children have enough free play. I want my children to not engage in dangerous behavior. So what do? I make sure that when it comes to free play, areas where the child can choose. I have a 2-year-old. Free play is one thing, running around, going outside. Another one, area that they could choose. When it came to choosing their clothes, for instance, I could put out several types of clothes and allow my child to choose. A child who's gotten it out of their system and is able to choose is going to be more likely to respond to my commands when I say that, no, we're not supposed to do something. The other one is to make dangerous behavior safe. Make something that normally would be dangerous. For instance, I will have those little play knives or play cutting boards, right? I'm making a behavior that would be dangerous. I make that safe for the child. Or I allow dangerous behavior, but I'm observing. As a parent, I'm watching. And so now my children want to use the same instruments that I use, but because I'm sitting there, then now it's no longer dangerous. I'm watching. There's some things that are intrinsically dangerous, nobody can ever do. There's other things, if a parent is watching and it happens under my watch, then the thing becomes safe. Okay, so those are some of the things that we wanted to do. Now we're going to do some dangerous situations, okay? And we're going to have a couple of principles in mind. Of course, these principles that we're keeping in mind, one, we're trying to save those times that we have to go to DEFCON 1, right? We don't want to have to have those situations where I'm screaming and I'm shouting and I come down like a ton of bricks because I know how serious those are for a child. So I'm avoiding that. If there is time, this is now dangerous behavior. If there is time, then I'm going to go through the following steps. One of them is if I can replace what the child is doing with something else. So I know my child's taste, this just requires for me as a parent, right? My child is about to engage in, I'm going to give you a case study later, but I know that my child, for instance, if they see this new activity that I'm about to do, they'll be distracted. So my son is now pushing a chair towards the chair or stool towards the oven, right? There's a hot pot over there, but there's time now. So because I know that my son likes it if I offer him to ride on my back as a horse, right? Especially if I get down on my knees and then I neigh, and he really like that. So then what I do is, in order to distract him, there's time now. Without me saying anything, the first thing would just be I'm going to distract him by getting down. You want to come ride on the horse's back? Right? I haven't had to say no. So replacement, all it means is that I know what the child likes, because children are different. Some children like to play gun games. Every children are different. I know my child and what they would like to do. So that's number one. Number two would be that, and by the way, we're not trying to bribe children. There's sometimes when I'm bribing, what we're doing in this first case is not that I do this as a bribe. I'm just distracting you by offering you something that's even more attractive. Okay. The second thing would be if that doesn't work, and most of the time that other one would work if it's a small child, the next one would be to replace it and gently tell the child that, no, I would like whatever it is you're doing. So I'm gently doing it, but I haven't screamed or anything like that. Here, can I have that? And I'm replacing it with something that the child likes. If that doesn't work, then the next step is to be serious. I'm still not DEFCON 1. I'm just, I need this. And then the last one, of course, is going to be shouting, but now we're going to do the case study. So our case study is about a little boy named Hashim. Right? So Hashim, the parent sees that he's about to go grab a knife. Okay? So first the parent tries to distract Hashim. They go down the knees and try and be a horse. Hashim's not ready to listen. Hashim's making his way over to the knife. Now that Hashim has the knife, first the gentle one is, Hashim, can I have the knife, please? Here, why don't you take this banana? Hashim loves bananas. Here, Hashim, why don't you take that? Hashim is not, he's swinging the knife now. So now I'm serious. Hashim, I need that knife, baby. Right? That doesn't work, then it's, drop the knife, Hashim. Right? But now that one, because now you might see if you're always gentle, then your children get scared when they finally see you raise your voice. At this stage, after we've been stern, it's very important for us afterwards to embrace the child and to get the fear out of them, right? I wasn't upset at you, right? I wanted you to be safe. That's why I was stern, right? It's not that you were bad, right? So we try to avoid, if there's an opportunity, we try to avoid getting stern. Most of the time we've been so gentle, playing, laughing, joking, but then those rare times is now because the person needs it. Okay, now we're going to deal with the inappropriate behavior. So inshallah, brothers and sisters are able to see this, that up until now, can you imagine how much, like if there was a parent who's taking all of those steps, playing, freedom, stuff like that, the emotional bond that should be there between them and their child, right? Most of the time, you're not going to even be dealing with a lot of issues that people are dealing with later, okay? But sometimes their behavior, which is not dangerous, it's actually inappropriate. Inappropriate behavior is a little different. Inappropriate behavior are things, and again, we're going to make a difference. There's something that is ugly for a child, or ugly for an adult, but not ugly for a child. Let's say playing with their food, right? I'm 50 years old. If I'm playing with my food, that's not, but if a little kid is playing with their food, that's actually a good thing. That's healthy, right? Some of the behavior, some parents are coming down on like a ton of bricks. Ripping books wasn't a bad thing, as an example, right? Okay, but there's some things that are inappropriate behavior. And I'm going to give a certain list. I mean, this isn't all of them, but there are some things that we want to do. And our job is to keep our children from forming bad habits. Adat qahirat. Imam Hassan says that bad habits, sometimes they're overpowering. Even what you'll see is sometimes somebody is outwardly religious, practicing hijab, beard, wajibat. But there were certain bad habits that I formed as a child, and those bad habits are coming back to bite me. For instance, as a child, I was lazy, right? I'm praying, I'm fasting, all these things, but I never worked on now I lack motivation, and now it's coming back to bite me in other areas, but that bad habit formed as a child. So, what are some inappropriate behaviors? And then after that, what is our strategy going to be? So for instance, inappropriate behavior, one of them would be, God forbid, if a child is playing with their private parts, that's inappropriate for us, okay? Foul language, if a child is using foul language for us, that's inappropriate for. Sometimes it's violence when it comes to others. If a child is smacking another child, hitting another child, that's also ugly behavior for us. Sometimes it's taking a person's rights, right? Like I will take something that belongs to someone, not smacking them, but taking something that belongs to them. Sometimes a child has learned to hide things and be dishonest, right? And the child thinks that that's a good, so that's another one, right? So anyhow, lying, for instance, is another one of those kind of things. So now a couple of things for us to keep in mind to make sure that we can correct when the child is young. Correcting behavior when your child is young is a lot easier than waiting till the child is old and this has become a habit, right? If you have a small tree, you can fix a small tree. Once it's become an oak, okay? So now what happens is, normally, first step, if we see inappropriate behavior in a small child, our first step is to do detective work. This child who's doing something which is inappropriate, because they were born as a muwahhid, they were born on the fitrah, they must have picked it up somewhere. The child must have seen this. They must have picked it up somewhere. So that means for you or for parents, because sometimes a parent will feel, am I being investigated? Is my character under question? No. The child, if they're doing something which is inappropriate, they learned it somewhere. Our job is to find out where they learned it and then to deal with that root cause so the child isn't exposed to that. So that means the detective work is something that all of the parents need to cooperate with the staff in doing. If something is noticed, then we all start looking. Where did the child possibly pick this up? Okay, so that'll be step number one. Because remember that hadith that the heart of the child is like an empty field. Amir al-Mu'mineen said, whatever's cast in it, then the person will receive it. Okay? So, I'm going to use a word. It's not foul language. In Farsi, it's not necessarily a good word. Okay, but it's not a bad word. Okay, so inshallah. The word divane. Okay. So anyhow, this little kid. So Ali Ridha, his bad dad. Ali Ridha is having a conversation with his friend. Ali Ridha is having a conversation with his friend. His little daughter Mariam is sitting there and she's playing with toys. But as you know, little kids are paying full attention to what the adults are doing. She's just playing with her toys, playing with her dolls, and the dad's having a conversation. Then the dad gets upset and he says, Divane, don't do that again, to his friend on the phone. So now the little girl heard that. Right? The dad finished the conversation. He now goes to the garage. He's working in the garage. And the little girl, she's 3 years old, she has an argument with her bigger brother. She doesn't know what divane means. She just knows when you're angry, you say that. So she gets angry at her brother, and then she says, Divane, don't do such and such. So now the mom's name is Zainab, the mom comes running over. Where did you say that? Right? She's starting to argue. The dad hears the commotion. He comes running out of the garage. What's going on? This little girl said Divane to her brother. So then the dad's like, where did you ever hear that word? I heard you say it. So then the dad realizes. So now the expression on the dad's face changes. Now he's just playing and he's calming the children down. But his wife is still fuming. But now it's not at the little girl, it's at the dad because they learned that wrong behavior. So we want to be real careful about that. Step number 2, so the detective work was you and I trying to find out the source of that bad behavior, making sure that the children aren't interacting with that source, and we're stopping it at the source so they don't pick up that wrong behavior. But step number 2 is different. The first time you and I see a child behave inappropriately, the first time that we see an inappropriate action from a small child, we don't go DEFCON 1. At first, what we do is we practice a technique called Teraful. Teraful is to ignore something. Sometimes, if I show a lot of sensitivity, as soon as I see a certain action, the child will now pick it up and know that that's a big deal, right? So at first, if I see a wrong action, the first step is going to be that I'm trying to, let's say, I'm going to find out what the source is, make sure that doesn't happen, but I'm not going to come down like a ton of bricks immediately as soon as I see that happen. The Imam tells us that actually, Amir al-Mu'mineen, he says that one of the best of the traits of karama is this, ghaflatuka, so when you pretend not to know, amma ta'lam, you know something, but you pretend that you don't notice in order to do tarbiyah of it, as opposed to coming down like a ton of bricks. The next step after that is, again, when the child's young, so I first try to stop it, research, don't pay attention to it. The next step would be to actually distract the child. Instead of fighting about it, Well, because the child doesn't know what it is and how bad it is, but by distracting the child, we can make sure that this thing doesn't become a habit for the child. So we come up with something else that the child would find interesting, and we get them to not continue doing that kind of bad behavior. The next one, though, so let's say that didn't work. Remember we talked about the idea of stories, songs, right? These are indirect ways of us teaching children the right behavior. So if you and I can have a story where the character is about the same age as our child, and then they can see a clear moral lesson of what we're not supposed to do, then that's an indirect way. So for instance, you want to stop a child from lying and you tell them about the little boy who cried wolf, right? So that's a story and the person's listening. We don't want to be like the little boy who cried wolf, right? Indirectly, the person's learning not to do the bad actions, especially if you and I have built up the character of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. So if you have created, let's say Imam Ali is a hero to your child, right? He's Mizanul A'mal to your child. If you can have a story of the Ahlul Bayt, where because you've already done the hard work and your children look up to whatever member of the Ahlul Bayt, then that's another powerful way of getting